Morning everyone, my name is Connor Wynn.
My name is Mark Roden.
I'm John Collin.
And I'm Colin Atlas.
And we're here today to pitch to you our game Bloodbane. So, what is Bloodbane? Bloodbane is a cartoon/horror based platformer that follows a werewolf character that the player will control. The aim of the game is to get from point A to point B without dying from any obstacles that is in the way of the said path of the werewolf. There is a health system with pickups placed throughout the level to help alleviate any damage that the player would take from said obstacles. And there will be a scoring system with some pickups and the ability to destroy enemies that the player will encounter with an inbuilt swipe system within the werewolf itself. The justification for using Bloodbane, we had 4 game ideas at the very start: Bloodbane, Dragon's Descent, Hedgehog Run, and Stickman Prison Wars. We ended up deciding to go with Bloodbane as the game concept itself was quite unique in comparison to the other ones. We also, on top of that, deduced that the idea seemed better because it was both easier in creation and coding, we felt. And the research that we produced and found out backed up this idea a lot as well. Details for Bloodbane. Bloodbane will be intended for an online web browser PC gaming market on sites such as Miniclip or Congregate, which I'm sure a lot of you have used before. It will target age between 16 and 20. And be giving a age rating of PEGI 12 because there will be some small senses of cartoon violence, and 16 to 20 just felt right because it will be a cartoony horror, so that is generally the age you might associate with something like that after doing some research. It will be intended to run needing only some requirements like Unity web player, Google Chrome, and like a minimum of Windows 7. And it will contain a screen resolution of 1024 by 1080. Requirements for Bloodbane. Although there are some requirements for the game, they aren't too huge. There will be a lot of diversity in it. So like I previously stated, Unity web player, any recent version of Chrome, Firefox, Edge or Safari also. When it comes to Chrome, we're looking at Windows 7, 8, 8.1, 10 or later, Intel 4 processor or later, that's SSE2 capable, and you see there's a lot of variety in that, but it is a requirement because you have to have Windows 7 at the very least we're looking at. You will need 1 GHz or faster 32-bit or 64-bit processor. 1 GB of RAM or 32-bit or 2 GB of RAM 64-bit. 16 GB available hard disk space, 32-bit or 20 GB 64-bit. And then finally, DirectX 9 graphics device with WDDM 1.0 or higher driver. How will Bloodbane be made, you might ask? So, as previously stated, the game will be made for web browser use. So the assets in the game will be made in Illustrator and Photoshop. Photoshop at home or an alternative to Illustrator. As Illustrator, you do need to purchase this. Could be Inkscape or Illustrator using the resources here in Biffy. And then we'll be proceeded to render it in Unity. And then finally brought to life using C# coding. Each member of the team will be set tasks to make assets in pairs of 2. So once these assets are created, the team will discuss which assets out of the 2 created are preferred, and then they will be used and then fine-tuned, and this process will repeat itself indefinitely until the game itself is complete. For example, in one of the meetings we discussed the level design itself. So we split up into 2 groups and we decided 2 people would do a forest and 2 people would do a cave, and then we decided the one we liked the most out of both. So next I will pass it on to Mark here, and he will talk about market research and so forth.
Hello everyone, I'll be talking about the market research and the comparisons to other games and also similar competitors. So the market share we're looking into is 4% of the total revenue of the game industry, which is 108.9 billion in 2017. The gender of the market we're looking at is 48% female and 52% male, but we will be mainly targeting the male demographic. But it won't hinder your experience if you are a female playing the game. Like Connor mentioned before, the age is 16 to 20. We decided on this because we thought the people who would play the game would mainly be students in secondary schools, in computer class, looking for a way to just mess around and play some fun games while the teacher isn't looking. So it also fits that our cartoony horror style as well, so that would appeal to them as well. Sexuality we deem irrelevant, so it doesn't matter if you're gay, bi, straight, asexual, you'll hopefully enjoy the game that we make. The income of our target audience would be class 1, which is lower middle class, or C2, which is skilled working class, so basically everyone in this room. Religion, we couldn't really think of any religion that would have a problem with the game, so we just said any faith against the supernatural, just to kind of cover ourselves in case anyone would find that offensive in any way for some reason. The hardware will be PC, web browser, Geo. So we're going to be targeting that, which, like I said before, is the 4% of the gaming market. Our genre is 2D action side-scroller, which is where 22.5% of the gaming sales in America last year. Games similar to Bloodbane are, in terms of aesthetics, our game will kind of resemble Darkest Dungeon. Obviously, we won't be going into as much detail as this game is, but just the overall tone and the kind of dark colours, that's what we're aiming to replicate for our game. And mechanically, games similar to ours would be games like Shovel Knight and Rayman Legends, which include mechanics such as moving, jumping, attacking, and picking up collectibles. As you can see here on the left, we have an image of the Shovel Knight attacking, which is basically just a swipe attack, which will be implemented to our werewolf. And on the left here you can see in Rayman Legends the jump mechanic implemented, where he's also picking up collectibles. So we will also have that in our game. And then the objective of the game will resemble pretty much every generic 2D platformer, and the most obvious example would be Super Mario Bros., which is get from point A to point B without dying. Unfortunately, we are not the first people to come up with a werewolf game. As you can see, 2 examples here. We have Blood of the Werewolf and Vox Populi Vox Dei, a werewolf-based thriller. And I'll be talking about them more now. Bloodbane compared to Blood of the Werewolf. In comparison, our game will focus on the werewolf, more than the half-human, half-werewolf aspect of Blood of the Werewolf. Because in that game you transition between the human and the werewolf, but we will focus primarily on the werewolf. Bloodbane may not include a boss fight. We need to see about time constraints, because in Blood of the Werewolf they do have a boss fight at the end of each level, but we'll see how we come up for time for that. It shares the objective of having the character try to get from the start of the level to the end without dying, which, like I said before, is in most platformers. And Blood of the Werewolf isn't a browser game. You download it on Steam, so its minimum requirements to run would be a lot different than our game, which is just on the web browser. And Vox Populi Vox Dei, compared to Bloodbane, will be a role reversal. In this game, you play as a human trying to kill werewolves. So we won't be doing that. We're playing as a werewolf, hopefully trying to kill humans. Our art style will be cartoony, whereas this game is more 8-bit and retro. So they'll differ greatly. Similarly, it's a simple platformer where you just, avoid enemies, kill enemies, avoid hazards, and get to the end of the level. But it does share one similarity with Bloodbane, and that is that it's also a web browser game. So it'll have the same minimum requirements that our game does. I'll now pass you on to John, who will explain the story of Bloodborne and go through some of our assets.
So the basic premise of our game is that you are a human who was infected by the previous werewolf of the game, who has now returned to the village. So you chased after him after you were attacked. So and then you ended up blacking out and ending up in a cave, which is where the game would start. So your ultimate goal is to get through each level, to get back to the village, in the hopes of getting revenge on the person who inflicted you and destroying the village. These are some of the enemies within the game. Now we had to justify why a frog, a bat, and a bee were a threat to a werewolf. So we've given them silver-based attacks, such as silver tongue, silver fangs, and a stinger, which still doesn't really make much sense in the long run. I also added a gradient to my bat, which is equally pointless because it's very small within the game. There will be more added as we go. Now these are some of the consumables within the game, which you'll pick up to increase your health as you take damage. And there will be more added as we play along. These are just the general ones. These consumables will be for your power. So the more you collect, the stronger you will be, and the more damage you will inflict on the enemies. So in the actual game, which I have started working on, this is animated, so it looks like it's like a waterfall of blood. But we haven't got that ready yet, so too bad. And these are a few of the hazards. I don't know why mine's not there. So there's bear traps, nettles, or thorns, and another bear trap. I have done a pendulum, which has the swinging motion at my level, but we haven't got that finished either, so moving on. These are two of the werewolves we have finished designing, and we're hoping they'll be easier to animate than they look, but I'd rather doubt it. So this one is mine, and then this one is Mark's. We went for two different complete styles. His is more realistic, whereas mine's more cartoonish and savage. I wish I thought of Skyrim when I was designing my werewolf, but such is the case. As poor Connor was saying, we've each tasked with designing a background, 2 caves and 2 forests. These are the 2 forests that were submitted. And ultimately, I think we went with this one, because it had a more aesthetic and 3D approach to it, giving it more depth and more life. Whereas the other one was just trees and such. This is one of the first caves. It has more of the platform look to it. You can see the platform with a few consumables within it. Whereas this is the other choice, which is the one I'm using right now for my level, which has a more realistic platform look to it. So rather than just having the floating platforms, it has little conclaves connecting it to the ground to make it look more realistic. And over here is a general mood board of our level so far. So as you can see, this is used for the caves and these are used for the forests. I will now pass this on to Connor, who will finish off the presentation.
So when we were designing Bloodborne, we wanted it to be easy to learn and play. And so we decided that we were going to use like the standard layout for PC games, which is WASD, space, and left click to attack. And we did this because most people who are going to be playing games online are PC gamers anyway, and they would be like very intuitive controls, and it would make it easier to learn. Some of the unique selling points of Bloodbane are that it's again easy to learn, and it's also it's kind of unique because there's not very many platform games that use the cartoon style and have like a horror theme, and also plays a werewolf. Some of the assets in the game are like very unique to a fantasy style and really add to the game. Our game is like it has depth. It has like a quite intricate story, as John did, but it's also again really easy to play if you don't want to know the story and like play. So some of the improvements that we decided we could do for Bloodborne are we could spend more time on the art style to refine it and make everything like more intricate or detailed, and make our art style together more unanimous so that everything is more similar in the game. As for improving our code, we wanted to make our code more readable so that if we want to come back and change something, it would be easier in the future, and also use more efficient code so that it would run better in the game. We also wanted to improve usability so that no matter who was playing it, they would find it easy to play and wouldn't have like problems going about the world. And as for using navigation, like with the UI and in the game, we wanted it to be like really simple. Like everything about this game needed to be simple so that anyone can play it. And so at the moment we have finished most of our assets, and in the next couple of weeks we're going to be starting on our white box world and figuring out what code we need to build for like platforms and pendulums, etc. And then in 3 weeks we're going to be doing the UI, so menus and options, etc. And then for week 4 and 5 we're going to be just basically dragging and dropping everything into Unity and like just filling out the world, making it an actual game. And then for week 6 we're going to be testing it, making sure there's no bugs and it runs fine and you can't fall through the world or anything. And then at the end of week 6 we'll be doing some fine tuning, so adding things that we have time for or fixing small bugs that might not have been noticed. And so if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
So I've heard multiple times through your presentation you state your game title with Bloodborne. Was Bloodborne an inspiration for your game?
It was a heavy inspiration, mainly just because of the kind of dark atmosphere that Bloodborne gave off, and the kind of we really liked the idea of the monsters in Bloodborne, so we thought it would be a cool idea if we made the main character one of those monsters.
We felt like the horror style when it comes to creating games is generally an easier style to follow as well. And since Bloodborne is such an impressive game and a big title, we decided to try and make a twist on it in the 2D world with our own creative twist as well.
I had no say in the matter.
Any other questions?
How many levels are you planning to make?
So there will be 4. So you will go from one cave, and then you go from that cave to the next. So 2 caves, like we did, and then there will be 2 forests. And once you get from the 2 forests, if we have time, we were thinking that we would make a quick animation that the werewolf arrives to the village, and he just runs out the village, and maybe it will just cut off there, and you can leave the rest up to your imagination. So that's the ideal situation. We will have 4, but that last part is just maybe an extra bit for like the fine tuning at the end.
And it'll be 1 level per person as well, so we'll each make our own levels.
How are you planning on conveying the story of the game to the player? Like I've seen you have quite an in-depth story to the game. How are you planning on like making the player aware of what's going on? Is there going to be like a in-game like I don't know, like a video, or is there going to be like a narrator or?
So we've been debating this. When it comes, once again, because we're aware of time constraints and stuff like that, there was an idea placed forward at the start that we would have some sort of little animation or some sort of little video that might explain the story, that might go into depth in this. If not, then we would probably do maybe in the style of like a note that's like covered in blood or something, that it will contain the story, that the player can read it before they start playing, or they can just skip it if they want because they just want to play the game itself. So we cover both sides of the spectrum in that manner.
As a group of 4 then, how did you go about making decisions in the group?
So We set one person to be secretary, which was me, and that meant when it came to group decisions, I didn't get a vote. And then three people, the three would cast a vote on all the assets given, so that way there would always be either a unanimous one. And that was generally what was done going forward.
With a 6-week time constraint, do you think it is a good use of time to duplicate assets as a creation and then choose the best? Would it not be better to just decide a style and create single assets?
It's a good question. Yes, maybe it's probably better to do it that way. We might end up changing it to do it that way. But we just wanted to make sure that everyone had that input, that we all knew that we had some sort of opinion in this game, that it wasn't just one person's way. So we wanted to cover all the bases, but with the time constraint left, we may have to change that a bit. But most of the art assets at this point are complete. So it is just coming down to level design itself. And since we're all making our own levels and then bringing it together as a group, I don't think having different opinions in that matters, as long as we keep the same art style, which is already being dealt with.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.